Good afternoon, everyone. Good, good, good. So, first of all, thank you all so much for registering for our workshop on today. As Stephanie mentioned, it is called Elevating Leaders, Integrating Integrity, Ethics, and Accountability in Systems of Care. But before we get started, I would like a few of you to introduce yourselves, give us what you do in the name of your agency or organization. So, whomever wants to go. Thank you. Go ahead. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Um, I didn't hear too many people speak and say that they were the owner of the agency or the organization that they were working for. But the reason why that is important is because each and every one of you, whatever your role is within that organization or agency, you are a leader. The type of perception that the families and the children have starts from the introduction. It starts from the administrative assistants when they, answer the phone. It starts from their tone. It starts from, how pleasant they are, how willing they are to answer the questions of the family. It starts from when they walk in, how they're greeted, you explaining the different services that you have. And so I wanted to let you all know that each and every one of you in here, you're a leader regardless of your how much you're getting on your paycheck, because we all know as helping professionals, it's not up to everything that the work that you put in, and so that you can take the leadership role in whatever position you are in. And just to give you a little bit of information about myself, again, my name is Melshani Collins, and I am the CEO and the family advocate of the G.R.A.C.E agency, where we advocate for families that have child welfare cases. We also help families and fathers to gain paternal rights to their children through legitimation and other court petitions, such as modification of child support, modification of custody and visitation, as well as contempt, paternity, and name change. And then we also help to connect families to local community resources. Our current program that we have, because we were blessed by the state of Georgia to receive a grant where we are teaching dad about their parental options in the state of Georgia. So we hold a virtual monthly workshop where we talk to dads about what their options are, from birth certificates to paternity acknowledgement to putative father registry, also to legitimation. And what we do is we pay for the legitimation filing fees up to $250, as well as if they want to do any type of legal consultations with the Atlanta Bar Association, we pay for that as well. And just to give a little bit more background, I did work for the Department of Family and Children's Services for about 7 years. And one of the things that I noticed while working in child welfare was once we took the children out of the home, we would have fathers come out of the woodworks. Fathers that had just talked to their child not only a week ago. They had just took them to Disney World. They had, just visited their mother's home. And the question that the dads would always ask is, why was I not notified that my child was taken out of the home? And what we had to tell them was, we didn't get the information from the mom. Mom never told us that you existed. But what I started finding out is that it's not that mom didn't give us the information, it's that the case manager never asked. And so when the case manager never asked, the mom could give us whoever she wanted for placement. She can give us the next door neighbor. She can give us uncle and auntie around the way. She can give us a family friend. And we would only assess those people that she gave us for possible placements, leaving the father completely out of the case. And so once, fathers, okay, now I know that my child has been taken out of the home. I want to get my child. I pay child support. And we would have to tell the fathers, unfortunately, child support does not grant you custody or visitation when it comes to your child. And so dads would be, of course, upset. And, okay, so what do I need to do? And when we tell them the process of legitimation, most dads are like, first of all, I don't have the money. Second of all, I don't want to go to court. I already had, some bad days or bad experiences. I don't want to do this process. And so our agency kind of took on the initiative of helping fathers to get through the process by guiding them and leading them in where they should go for resources, talking to attorneys, also just being able to obtain the paperwork. So that is what we do. If you all have any fathers that may need the services or it may be a benefit to your agency, you can ask some questions at the end. As a disclaimer, and I'm sure many of you all have seen this in every single session, I have to say this. The views presented in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views of the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. Okay. So we're going to be discussing integrity and leadership when it comes to systems of care. As we know that there are multi-systems of care in these agencies. So we might have law enforcement, we might have mental health facilities, we may have child welfare. But the specific one that I want to talk about under child welfare is foster care. So these are 3 statistics that I found that has to do with us being able to implement integrity, ethics, and accountability in our decisions as leaders. So the first one is that Georgia is ranked 37th in the nation for child well-being. And that statistic alone is alarming. So that means that we are only about 13 above the lowest of the low when it comes to child well-being and meeting what we're supposed to meet. The second one is that 11,000 children are currently in care, but the difference with that is that African American children almost double the victimization rate of Caucasian children in care, with being about 58 African American children to 32 of Caucasian. Also in the state of Georgia, non-relative foster parents account for 46.5% of the victimizations in care, while only 6.5% nationally. Now, does anyone know what a non-relative foster parent is? Okay. So a non-relative foster parent is somebody that has no connection to the child at all. No blood connection, no connection by law. They're not a relative or a family friend. They are what you would consider a group home, a PRTF. They are considered other agencies that are able to care for children outside of a relative or their parents. Now, what I found alarming about that was that at 46.5% with victimization, that means that these are places that DFACS or any other organization has deemed as safe, but their victimization rate is close to what a relative victimization rate would be. So that was concerning to me, because if it is 46.5 in the state of Georgia, but only 6.5 nationally, why are we continuing to put children in unsafe positions? How are we deeming these particular facilities or foster parent homes safe with the victimization rate going up? So the 3 things that we're going to learn today is, number 1, how to recognize personal and systemic biases. This is so important because every decision that we make as leaders in our helping professions affects what happens to children and our biases and perceptions as well. The second is we're going to learn how to implement ethical decision-making frameworks that can enhance accountability, transparency, and trust within the systems. And the third one is that we are going to put some things in action, right? We're not just going to talk about it, but we're going to be about it. And we're going to learn some steps for how we can get better with accountability and integrity within our specific organizations. All right. So I have never in particular been to this type of meeting that I'm about to announce. But one of the things that I've always seen on movies or in television is when you go to an AA meeting, the first thing that they say is that in order for you to be accountable, you have to admit that you have an issue. And so the thing that I found interesting is that we all may have our own personal biases of where we came from, our environment, what we have experienced, but we necessarily don't take those into account when it comes to making decisions for our families. And so when we don't take those things into account, the harm is disproportionate based off of what we feel or what we experience. And so, two types of personal biases. One is your implicit bias, which is completely unconscious. It's not something that you're meaning to do, it's not something that's on the forefront of your mind, but it is something that guides your decisions. And the second one is explicit bias. And that explicit bias is intentional. And it's something that we are doing on purpose, something that we are calling out. And so I wanted to give you a real life example of what an implicit and explicit bias is. So I'm going to call my guest to come up. And y'all, he don't bite. This is my husband, Jonathan. Um, but some of the times when we are getting involved with families, we judge them for whatever. We judge them by their homes. We judge them by their dialect. We judge them by the way that they look. We judge them by why we even have a case or why they're coming to us in the first place. I want you to stand in the middle. So just by looking at him, just act like he was a father that was coming to you all for assistance or help on whatever it was. Just by looking at him, I want you all to tell me what implicit or explicit biases you would see just by judging him off of what you see. Say that again. But what about his hat and beard? Would you judge? Okay. Okay, that's fair. Anybody else? Hard worker? Okay, and why would you, what about his appearance would make you say that? Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
I would say it was a very active and athletic basketball. So I would perceive him as engaging or want to be in his child's life or want to do things sports wise, just from his attire and how he shows up. I would see him as he's out with his son or whoever being active in their lives.
Okay. Okay.
Respectful. His body language gives off the I'm listening. Um, I'm just respectful.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead.
So I guess if you come, I think what you're saying, if you're coming from the lens of just stereotypes of how people may judge somebody by looking at them, I would probably say, thinking of those biases, like, oh, he probably may be a thug, or maybe he's a rapper, or that's kind of probably what someone who didn't know who had those biases would probably say.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna still follow up because you said implicit and explicit. That's
Yes.
not positive to me, in my understanding.
So implicit would be just your unconscious bias about.
Right,
Uh huh.
I'm saying now explicit, so I'm gonna say something that is conscious.
Mm-hmm.
He is so tall. I'd be afraid to meet him on the street at night because he just has like, so come my way.
Right.
Cross the street when he comes.
Got you. Got you. Okay.
He looks like a big teddy bear.
Okay. I'll get to you.
How perspective is so different from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard some things that sound negative or some things that kind of paint him
Absolutely, absolutely. But see, it would take someone to have a mature mindset and an experienced mindset where you would be able to see through the hat, the shoes, the necklace, the watch, right? Because some people would say, and I've heard this in the profession many times where, well, why you coming in for food stamps when you got on a watch and a ring and a necklace? You got money. I could have had that 10 years ago.
One of the best dressed women I know shops at the thrift store, but you'd never know because she looks like $1 million.
Exactly.
I call it the Goodwill. So you never know. I mean, she's immaculately dressed all the time.
Exactly.
Thrift store. You don't know, but you also don't know. Maybe he bought all these things. Maybe he had a great job, was doing great, bought these things, lost that job, now he's in a bad position and needs the assistance. You just don't know somebody's story until they share it with you. You just don't know.
Exactly, but most aren't open enough to hear somebody's story because they're looking at the outward appearance and they have already judged. No, you too big. You know, you look like a hoodlum, or you got money. And the thing about that is that your perception of someone could be completely wrong. You have no idea about their life story. You have no idea about what's going on with them. You have no idea about even where they come from. And so, as we spoke with a lot of you, we got a mixture, right? Hoodlum, scary, tall, big, a teddy bear, sophisticated. But I do want my husband to speak about who he is so you all can see.
Hello. So I have been on the bias side where I notice people, black and white, crossing the street as I'm approaching them. They jump into the middle of the road and kind of veer off because they look at me. They do see the beard. They do see the tattoos. They do see the size. But myself, I grew up in a church. Just to give you a little bit of information, in 2008, I was completely paralyzed. I had to learn to walk again. I had to learn to talk again. I had to learn to breathe again. And that led me to being a preacher. So now I preach in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm also a published author. I published my book in 2021, I think, during COVID. I'm also a business owner, father of 4, married. This year will be 10 years for us. So, it's not always what you see on the outside. I think it's really just getting to know somebody. Everybody has a story behind them. So, yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Shout out to Cincinnati. I'm from Cincinnati. When it comes to stereotypes, I was gonna say, I was like, he looked like one of my cousins or brothers.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing. And then when you said, I seen the Cincinnati thing, I was like, and plus he got Cincinnati stuff on, so he must got some connection there. See, you all right with me? I knew you was all right. But thank you for sharing your story, because that we, see the image, and oftentimes if you haven't had a good experience, I've been grateful in my life to have positive or beautiful experiences with black men. So implicitly and explicitly, I don't have those type of things, but I think if individuals had those or they see things in the media, it shifts their perception. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
It's something you said earlier that brought back to this full circle. Working with just families, and you talk about caseworkers.
Mm-hmm.
I had a case similar where the kid came into custody, daddy wasn't involved, and the question came up of why not. And her own personal experience and how her father wasn't involved, and how she saw her, the boys and the men in her life. She did not take the initiative to reach out to the father because of her own, bias and what it looks like. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that sometimes gets in the way when you're looking at resources for our kids.
Absolutely.
They take their own personal experience and don't know how to separate the difference, that our children need their father in their lives regardless of what we may think about our own personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
and taking that extra mile to include them in it so they could have a successful future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the issue with that, and the reason why I am wanting to bring that to the, go ahead. Okay. The reason why I want to bring that to the forefront is because so many times that's exactly what happens. And I think we don't think about how our perceptions or how our opinions and judgments of others can lead them down a road to decisions that we're long gone on, right? We've made the decision of if we're going to help this family or not, or if we're going to put in this particular service, or, I've heard so many people just like she mentioned about the father not being there, and the case manager will literally make the father pay, make his life hard, not respond, not follow up with him, not give him the proper resources to be successful, just because now it's a trigger. We also have to be responsible for our own triggers, because those lead to bad decisions that we can make that will impact the lives of the families. So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just gonna add to the thing about implicit bias and explicit bias is that it's based in learned behavior, which means that even if you don't think you have it, because
Yep.
our brains do the work. We don't have to experience something personally in order for them to activate.
Absolutely.
Right? So we can learn just by being exposed to certain environments, to certain practices. And I think what I appreciate about this particular idea in this system of care is that oftentimes you can go into an agency with all good intentions to do great work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the culture of the agency or the department or the leaders become something. And you just start to acquiesce, not even realizing that that's not your intention. It may not even be the intention of the place, but it's happened so much that it's being learned just from the being exposed in the environment. So sometimes it's all these factors coming in.
Absolutely.
And there's some we're very conscious because we have a belief about it, and then others we don't have a belief but we have dissonance about it. And so then it becomes a practice that we're not even aware, especially if someone doesn't bring it to our attention, that we've actually learned it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that is why we must pay attention to our own personal biases that we may have. Now, we mentioned earlier about the victimization rate amongst African American children versus the one of Caucasian. And what we found out again is that there was 58 African American children that the victimization rate was higher in non-relative foster parent homes. And that really takes a precedence in the way we make our assessments, our placement decisions, our program decisions as far as placing families with the resources and services that they need. And so the question that I want you all to ask yourself is, what role does personal bias, explicit or implicit, play in assessments, placements, and how we show up for our youth and families? Okay, so systemic biases affect safety and oversight. Systemic biases influence how we assess family risk and choose placement in programs. I have personally witnessed where we have made decisions for families based off of the type of food that they had in the home. There's policy where as long as the family are eating, right? So whether they have cans of tuna, whether they have noodles, whether they have bread, that is sufficient. The children have something to eat. But I've had to teach case managers that if that's what they have in a home, that does not mean that they are dumb. That does not mean that they are necessarily uneducated, or that does not mean that the family has issues in any of those areas because you feel like noodles is not sufficient for people to be eating. It is food, and if it's what the family can provide at the time, it's what the family can provide at the time. So we do have to be careful about how our systemic biases will affect safety and oversight when it comes to families. According to the CFSR report in 2024, that African American children experience disproportionately high rates of victimization and are more frequently placed in non-relative care, which further increases their risk of harm. So again, we talked about non-relative foster homes that are accounting for 46.5% of victimizations, compared to only 6.5% nationally. And I had to think, why is that? So I looked up some information and found some very disturbing statistics. So out of 40 homes, 40 foster homes, 28 of those foster homes lack several sufficient things in order for these cases to be able to move forward. And one of the things that I found was that these families suffered from no efforts towards permanency because the families were being inadequately assessed. I am currently working the case. As I mentioned, I do advocacy for families that have child welfare cases. I currently have a case that I'm working on with a family where the family has a foster care case since 2021. In that time, the family was living in the woods. They were living in the woods, under shelter. They had barely had a phone. When they were able to charge their phone up, they had to go to a local fast food restaurant or library to charge their phone up. They got a call for a completely unrelated issue, and the children were taken out of the home. So services was put in. They wanted them to do parental assessments. They wanted them to do psychological evaluations. They wanted them to do individual and family counseling. But the family said, how are we going to do that when we're living in the woods? We have no car. We barely have cell phone service. We have no food. We don't have a shelter. And because the family were non-compliant with the services, they went to court and they put in for adoption. And they wanted to terminate the parental rights of the mother and the father. So the father and the mother, they got themselves together. They, dug themselves up out of the dirt. They got employments, they got transportation. And by the time they got everything together that they needed to move forward with services, the department said, we're not going to help you. You were non-compliant the first time with the services. We are not going to allow you or pay for any services, which left the family at a disadvantage because now they have a termination or adoption against them because they were non-compliant when the department wanted to first put in services. But now that the family is stable, they are refusing, but they still have a case plan of 13 services that need to be completed. And so what the family ended up doing was paying for those services out of their pocket. The last case plan that they had put in place was in 2023, May of 2023. So the department not only has ignored the services that they have completed, but there also is no updated case plan. The family has had their particular case continued 17 times and has not been heard. There is no evidence. The family is gainfully employed. They have a home. They have their finances in order, and yet they still cannot get their children. And so one of the things that the family is currently working on is if we have completed everything that has been asked of us, why can we not get our children? How can we get our children out of the system? We completed services over 2 years ago, and the children are in care. They have suffered. They are over-medicated. The children have been coerced. The children have experienced trauma by being in specific placements that they were placed in. But right now, there's currently nothing that the family can do to get their kids out of care. And they have been in there for 4 years, going on 5 years now. So that is something that I really want us to pay attention to because, again, these children are supposed to be in what is considered a safe placement. But they are experiencing trauma by not being in the home of their parents. And why? The easier part will be you completed your services, the children can do some aftercare services, let's get these children back home. But instead, there has been opposition and red tape to get these children back in the home, and they're going on 5 years being away from their parents. So how do our assessment tools and placement program decisions unintentionally increase harm for youth and families? Now, I talked about earlier that there was 28 out of 40 homes, 40 foster homes that were suffering from a lot of discontention with services. Families weren't being adequately serviced. No services or referrals for services were being given to the parents. The children were not receiving the proper care that they should receive. And when I looked at that particular statistic, it was 70%. So that means that out of 11,000 children that are currently in care, only 3,300 children are receiving the appropriate services they need to be reunified back at the home. That is not because the children cannot be placed or there is no placement or something has happened with the parents in general. It is because of the decisions that we're making. Sometimes taking over a month to put in a service pushes the family back by 6 months. because you need to see something. You need to see some progress. You need to see something going on in that family regarding that service to get the children out of the home. But we don't know that. You know, this particular case manager that made the decision to put the children into care by their assessment of where the family was, that case manager is gone. This case has changed about several hands, 4 or 5 teams now. But that case manager didn't know that that decision that they made to report what they reported in 2021 would still have those children in care 4 years later. So we do have to be careful, you all, about the decisions that we are making on the behalf of children. So now we're going to talk about how to implement ethical decision making. So as we all know, what's ethical does not always equal what's policy, because we always have rules and values that will collide in leadership. And so ethical leadership means challenging practices that cause harm even when they are policy. So high victimization rates in Georgia call for leaders to question the following: overuse of unclear or gray policy, weak oversight of vetting, training, and also monitoring processes, and workforce strain and caseload pressure. I myself have experienced so much red tape when I saw that policy was not colliding with the values, or because policy had gray areas that it was placing a child in harm's way. And so I want to ask you all as leaders, when policy contradicts what's safe and fair, what should you do? Or what do you do? Have you all experienced that?
I think when that time comes, it's time to open up conversations. Um, I do know we've had some situations where, because I do a lot of, my program works with a lot of different agencies just
Mm-hmm.
because of the nature of what the program is.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times it's just having a conversation about what can we do
Mm-hmm.
and moving forward from there. Because maybe you can't necessarily change the policy, but what can you do that makes it a little better? Or who can you talk to that can change the policy? Is this something that we need to speak with, legislators about? Is this
Mm-hmm.
an agency policy that we need to speak with management about? What is it and who can we talk to move forward? And I think finding out that information and finding the courage to sit in the spaces that you need to sit in to have your voice heard or to
Mm-hmm.
have the voice of those you serve heard matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Being solution focused. In our organization, our executive leadership team is about 8 of us, and our, as a whole, about 700 staff, and we're definitely open. I know everybody says we're open to change, right? We
Mm-hmm.
know, I agree. But I always, like, if you come with a problem or issue, come with a solution as well. Even if you don't have it completely, like, figured out, let's start with something. So I think that has been very helpful. We have made a lot of changes, and not even that the policy was wrong, but it caused more burden on the populations we serve. And so how can we ease that? And if you adopt that trauma informed um, rhetoric, it helps with streamlining some things. It's not always, again, a wrong thing. It's just it's unnecessary. Like, how can we make this of ease to the people we serve?
Absolutely.
What I want to say is, regardless of what your position is with the organization, be willing to be that one to speak up, and to say something. Don't be a person that, well, we've always done this way, so let's keep doing it.
Tradition, right?
I'm not that person.
Right. Tradition must be broken.
Yes.
You want to go?
I was gonna say, read the policy carefully. Look for the loophole.
Okay.
That's right.
Come on.
That's right.
Find the loophole.
Yep.
And if the lawyers that are on the case for Diddy can find them, listen.
We can find them.
I'm just gonna piggyback on what you said and what Lynn said, like, being willing to have those conversations, right? Sometimes we've gotta have really hard conversations.
Absolutely.
Leadership that's willing to have those conversations, and we can really have good dialogue about the pros and the cons and the how can we make this work for everybody.
Absolutely.
Right? You gotta be open and honest and really look at your biases
Yep. Because they're there. They are there.
Also, make those loopholes fluid for those policies because working with each family, each thing is different. It's not cookie cutter, and when you expect that cookie cutter, and then therefore you're getting those fails. Because like I was saying earlier, you got to meet people where they're at, not where you expect them to. But we expect people to know this stuff. We expect people to know these resources. We expect people to know all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we do give it all, and if they don't take all of it in, we're like, oh, they failed the system. It's no, it's because we're not teaching them how to use those resources. We're not like we're overwhelming them with that, and to a point like the family you're talking about, they were homeless. Hey, they just wanted to get into a place that was stable.
The basics.
Right, and they had good intentions, but they were seen as bad and not good because they didn't have the ideal situation. So we just need to have fluidity into our policies instead of saying, okay, this is how we've done it, like we said, on that loophole, making new loophole, moving parts,
Exactly.
and growing with what is going on in our world.
Exactly. Exactly. Go ahead.
I think for me is making sure that you have that backbone and that you are willing to shake the table.
Mm-hmm.
My philosophy is never be so in bondage to a system that you're not willing to get out of it. So if that means you having to stand up and put your job at risk, you do that for the client or whoever you're working with to make sure that you're advocating for them. And it's about morals, values, integrity. And if you don't have a backbone and you are willing to be in bondage to a system just for a paycheck or whatever the case may be, then you compromise. And I think you have to just be in a position where you're not willing to compromise.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's what leads us. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I wanted to add something about that high victimization rates. Um, I'm a clinical director. Before that, I was a therapist, but I was a foster parent for 6 years, adopted 4 kids. I have literally reported foster parents for abuse and neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Foster parents that were long-term foster parents, and basically those homes were still allowed to stay open
Yep.
because those foster parents don't ask questions. They just do whatever we ask them to do. They don't ruffle feathers. So even though kids have been hurt or victimized in those homes, we're going to turn a blind eye to that. And
Mm-hmm.
goes back to what she says. You got to have people that are willing to say, no, we're not going to keep doing this just because this home is willing to never say no.
Yep.
We'll take any kid, because the foster parents that are going to take every kid, you really need to be watching.
Absolutely. And that's, I'm sorry, we're going to save it, okay? Because we do have to move on. But that is why we do have to be able to ask ourselves several questions, because we are under an umbrella, right? An organization or agency that have their own policy, that have their own rules. But we have to be able to ask ourselves a few questions in order for us to make the best decisions for our clients, because oftentimes we are the only ones that are the advocates, that are the voice for that family. So one question that we should always ask was, is this decision fair and free from bias? Is what I'm putting in place free from my own personal opinion of what is going to help this family, but it's actually something that the family is in need of? Second is, what are the short and long-term impacts of the decision on the individual and family? So if I'm going to put in this particular service, or if I'm going to make the referral for this family, are there any short or long-term impacts, especially negative, that can impact this family by me making the decision on their behalf? The third one, I don't think that we consider this enough, is, have I considered all culturally relevant community-based or family-centered supports before acting or implementing? I can't say enough that when we are taking into consideration the needs of the family, especially for different cultures, we have to look at the supports that they have, not the supports that we feel are appropriate for the family. A lot of families have supports of their local church or mentorship or have extended family, right? That might not be typical for us, but it is considered family for them. So we got to make sure that we have to utilize all the supports before we want to take children out of the home or before we want to make certain decisions about the services and the referrals that these families need. And then the fourth one is personal, is would I feel confident making this same decision if it directly affected me or someone I love? And that is really important because it's easy to be unattached from these families, right? At a certain point. Sometimes we get into burnout. Sometimes we get into a point where we just want to go ahead and close the case out, right? We have a deadline to meet. But do you want to be able to have that decision made for you if the shoe was on the other foot? So that's something that we need to take into consideration as well. And then we're going to adopt actionable steps. So what leadership accountability looks like is regularly reviewing disparity in outcome data. That means paying attention to patterns, right? If you're receiving a lot of cases or families that are of a specific race, right, or are of a specific demographic, we need to find out what's going on right now. I think I was talking to one of our service providers, and one of the things that she said with the new with what was going on with President Trump, where a lot of the Spanish families were being deported, or ICE was coming out, she's seen an influx in the need for services because they were scared, right? A lot of them weren't going to work anymore because they didn't want to just be picked up. A lot of them weren't showing up for school because they didn't want to be found out. I've had a neighbor that I found out stopped working their job, because they just didn't want to take the risk of being deported. And so now they need food stamps. Now they need, other services that they typically didn't need before because something new happened and came into place that now they needed to be taken into consideration. The second one is ensuring transparent reporting of in-care victimizations. Just like she mentioned back there, is that those certain foster parents weren't asking questions. They were just taking the children in. And because these are deemed safe placements, we're going to go ahead and place this child here. Now, whether it works for them, whether these foster parents can handle their behavior issues, whether they can accommodate what's going on with the children or not, this is a placement that they pass foster parent classes, we're placing them there, and then we'll worry about it later. So we need to be paying attention to our in-care victimizations. And then the third one is holding staff accountable for equitable decisions. Is the staff that is in the agency, do they align with the goals and the missions of your particular agencies? What is their character? What is their behavior? That's something that we all have to pay attention to. All right, and then transforming policy and integrity and oversight. So integrity means not just fixing individual incidents, but changing the systems. Much like the young lady back there said, you have to be unafraid, right? If you see something going wrong and it's causing harm to the families, whether it's intentional or not, it's something that you need to bring to the people that are in leadership, because sometimes the people that are in leadership are out of touch. Right? They're not in the trenches with the families anymore. They're not the ones out there, getting those phone calls at night about crisis, or they're not the ones that find out that this family needs food and, they don't have it until next week. So definitely, make sure that we can be the voice for the families. And so the steps for ethical leadership is auditing trends for high rates of disparity. So again, making sure that we're paying attention to who's coming in to our facilities, who's needing the help, who's needing the services. And then also to strengthen the use of natural community supports, which we talked about in the previous slide. And then also investing in training on bias, equity, and cultural humility. This is something that I wish that more leaders would really look into. Training is not just answering a bunch of questions and getting 100% on it or 80 and above. Training is really going out and seeing what are the biases that the case manager or the supervisor or the manager exhibiting when it comes to their everyday line of work. Again, from the administrative assistant to, the security officer that's answering the door to the one that is at the help desk. We need to be able to assess this in every single area in our agencies. And then real leadership shows up in action. Leadership is not just having these cute meetings where we talk about what we want to do, what we're seeing, and we're going to, go ahead and get those things in place. We need to have actionable steps as to how we can move forward in integrity and accountability. And so the first one is lead by holding yourself and others accountable. But that takes courage. Sometimes you can see others doing something that's wrong, and sometimes it's the go along to get along gang, right? Everybody is doing the same thing, and you're the oddball out. But have that courage to do something different so that these families will be treated appropriately. The second one is check your biases with every decision that you make. Center client and family voices in the process. I'm not sure if you all went to the LIPT presentation, and one of the things that I liked is that they said, I think it was family choice, family voice, or something of that nature, where the families are the ones leading what do we need, and then the professionals come in to collaborate. Not the professionals telling the family what they need and that they're going to do, but the family has their own voice and are able to collaborate on what they need. And then the fourth one is document and share ethical wins and challenges. So now we are about to do our role play scenario. And this is a real life scenario that I see all the time when it comes to fathers. And so I am going to need somebody to volunteer to be a supervisor. I do have a short script, so you don't have to come up with anything yourself. But does anyone want to volunteer to be a supervisor? You will? Okay, good. Ooh. Uncle Phil. All right, so this is your script right here. My husband is going to be the frustrated father. My daughter is going to be the case manager. Y'all can talk about how y'all want to do the script. It is very straightforward, but you can ad-lib if you want to, okay? All right, as they prepare to do the interactive role play, does anybody have any questions, any comments on anything?
I just want to say one thing.
Uh-huh.
In terms of policy, when they're given to you
Mm-hmm.
from management, it's black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But please always know there is a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
Every policy, there's a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
So don't just feel stuck with what's there in black and white.
Absolutely. Because the thing about policy is it cannot take into account humanity. It cannot take into account every situation that you might come across. It is a standard of how we should operate, but there's always room, just like you said, there's always a loophole that we can find to accommodate our families in the safest way possible. So good. Yep.
I have a question. In a lot of this work, we know that burnout is high.
Mm-hmm.
Caseloads are high.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say in terms of leaders, how leaders can think about supporting each other at their level to manage the level of work that not only they have to do, but also they have to manage with their teams in order to produce people who are mindful about the things that you're speaking of today?
The first thing that I would say is that you would have to really pay attention to how your team is operating as a whole. One of the things that I would find is just in our line of work as case managers was that our case managers had they had a lot of time to be unaccountable, meaning that they didn't have to be in the office. They could be out assessing a family. They could be out going to pick up food or a resource for the family, but a lot of that time was unaccountable. And so what we had to do was just make sure that we were conscious about what the families, what the case managers were doing, and how long it was taking them to do certain tasks. But also as a leader, one of the things that I had to do, because of course there was high turnover, workforce strain, so on and so forth, is that I had to get out in the field as well. There's sometimes as a leader where you have to get in the field with your people. In whatever respect of work or profession that you are in, you have to get in the field with your people. Sometimes you might have to take some calls. Sometimes you might have to step in and do assessments. Sometimes you might have to go and do visits. Sometimes you might have to complete paperwork. And so, you really just have to see where is a deficit in your team and what they need, and just kind of jump in wherever you can. And if you need to build a certain member up so that the team can run better, then you need to work on that as well. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just kind of wanted to comment on what you just said, because like you mentioned, in terms of leadership, we have to get out in the field. I think some of the value to that, even though it can be trying because we've got our own responsibilities and stuff, some of the value of that is, I think if we don't get out in the field, we lose perspective of what our staff are seeing and going through.
Yes.
And we lose perspective of what the families we deal with are going through, because we get so stuck in a rut of the paperwork and the back end stuff that you can't see, or I get too disconnected if I don't go periodically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you can, just like you said, you can get stuck behind the desk and it becomes well, what I used to do, but what you used to do no longer works. You need to find a new system or a new way. And sometimes you have to see how your particular team person works themselves, to find what way works best for them. Absolutely. All right, you guys ready? Okay. Now, this is the scenario, you guys. I'm going to read the scenario. So it is a putative father who had just found out that his 3-year-old son was removed from the mother and placed in the foster care. He was never contacted by the case manager. He wants custody or at least visitation, but is told he has no legal standing because he is not legitimized. The case manager is refusing to engage, saying the child is already in placement, and he feels ignored, disrespected, and shut out of the process.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Jonathan Collins. My son, Elijah Collins, was placed into foster care, and I'm just trying to figure out why. What's going on?
Well, the mother never gave us your contact information. The mother never gave us your contact information.
Did you even ask her?
Honestly, no. Most moms don't have the father's information.
Well, why wasn't I assessed and considered for placement?
Policy says that we only have to contact all household members, and because you're not living in the home, I did not contact you nor have the information to do so.
Well, I just got your number. I've been trying to reach out to you. Why haven't you responded or called back?
Technically, since you are a putative father, I can't talk to you about the case. And plus, the mother is not my only case. I have a full caseload of parents to help.
That's not too helpful. Well, can either you tell me how to get legitimized and what the process takes? I just want to be involved in my child's life and figure out what's going on.
Well, I am the supervisor here, and good afternoon, Mr. Collins. I apologize for your frustration and the confusion you experienced, but we just can't assist you with the DNA, and we can't assist you with the legitimization process or really answer any questions.
Okay. That was okay. All right. Well, is anyone going to come to my home and assess me while I get the DNA going?
So I will send somebody from the foster care department to contact you, and I'll make sure to follow up with the case manager and another supervisor when I get back to the office next week, because I'm going on vacation.
Well, I guess thank you for almost nothing, but I appreciate it.
So you know, we have like 20 cases that we gotta, there's a
we
couple of
gotta-
parents waiting. We're gonna really have a busy day today, so I'm
We need to
gonna
go ahead and get this one through. We already know what's up with this one.
Give me this. Thank you. Okay, you all. So from that brief interactive role play, did you all see some of the areas? Did you see anything that went wrong or that went right?
I think what went right is even though he was very upset about the situation, his body language and tone of voice was still very calm, even though he was upset. And the reason why that matters is because it can be misinterpreted, and then now he's labeled as aggressive or whatever. They're less likely to help him. They may make false claims about him, even though that wasn't his intention, right? His intention is simply, I want my child back. The system did me a disservice. But it can be misinterpreted versus like he maintained a very like even tone of voice. You could tell he was upset and frustrated because who would it be? But it wasn't very emotive. I think a lot of times we deal with parents or even youth and their expressions are really loud, and if we're not careful, we can interpret that incorrectly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it would, I understand they were following policy, which we have to do, right? We have to sit there and protect ourselves and the youth and the children, like, confidentiality. But I don't think that should have prevented them from giving them resources to support him in the legitimation process. Even though they can't discuss the case, you can still give resources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
It was really great acting, you know. I wanted, I think what was very interesting is that though the staff was very professional in the sense where they weren't like yelled into it and they were able to calm, I didn't sense any empathy from the staff. I didn't feel any like, I mean, they were professional, like they knew what to say and how to say it. They were trained, but I didn't hear anybody say, "Wow, this is a father here that's upset." And internally, and if they couldn't do anything, it didn't come out in the delivery. It was more checking the dots and being polite and doing what's politically correct as we move on. And I don't know. I think in this field of work, we have to have empathy, even if you can't do anything at that moment. That person can feel that, hey, you know what I mean? My hands are tied at the moment.
Absolutely.
What I can do next, or hold on, hold that thought. Let me call somebody. Even if you don't even try, like it was just kind of a dismissal.
Absolutely.
I was just to say it's a dismissal. I saw it as black and white.
Mm-hmm.
They were just dismissive, not the facts that he was well-natured, well-respectful. His body language, the case manager should have been taking note on all that, because that's her role.
Mm-hmm.
But she was just so listening to her supervisor that wasn't even listening at all.
Mm-hmm.
She's just policy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both just policy. She's looking up to this, and as they walk off, no, we got so many cases, and you just know they're not going to get back to him.
Absolutely.
But he still kept on with that respect,
Mm-hmm.
because he knows now I'll continue to do what I can on my part. Like you said, the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked them again, if I'm doing my part, can you please come visit?
Absolutely.
When you think about systems and just policy, for her to say, "Oh, only the people who live in the house," like looking at due diligence, like why not even consider the father from the beginning, regardless whether he's in a home or not,
Right.
he's the father.
Right.
And so I think we talk about systems and policies, knowing that that system itself fails every time, because even if he wasn't a father, if he was a mother,
Right.
if she wasn't living in a home, it takes her the opportunity for this kid to have family who is willing to step in, even if it's an aunt, uncle, someone to keep them out of a system, to say that because I wasn't in the home that you can't reach out to me, says a lot about how it's a breakage in how our system is set up.
And that's why I mentioned in the presentation that what's ethical does not always equal what's policy. Because even though the father wasn't in the home and it says that all household members must be assessed, it did not say that you can't assess the father. It just said all household members must be assessed. So the father could have been assessed as well. Would it have taken extra effort on the part of the case manager to get that information? Absolutely. But we found out that she didn't even ask the mother the information of the father during the assessment. Exactly. Exactly. Go ahead,
So
Steph.
that's the loophole, right? So
Yep.
the household must be assessed.
Yep.
But it doesn't say that extended family members cannot be assessed.
Absolutely.
But what I was gonna say too is I appreciate the questions he asked. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times individuals don't know the questions to ask
Mhm.
to prompt the next thing
Mhm.
from the people who know the policy.
Mhm.
So that's a documentable thing. I asked these questions.
Absolutely.
When you go above the supervisor and say, I came on such and such a day, I did the things I was asked to do, da 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 da, and I ask these questions because those are questions that fall within the lines of the policy.
Absolutely.
So it's building leverage for the case beyond what is obvious or what's salient in the moment.
Absolutely.
Because that's all necessary for making sure that all possible parties can be involved in doing, in making sure the placement is the safest and the most ethical.
Absolutely.
So it's for her. Oh, so I was gonna say I have a different take. I don't think it was professional at all, and I think that's a common misconception, especially in a lot of like opinion channels, that they weren't empathetic. Also, just because they said the quote unquote policy that they thought they was following, I still just don't think how they approached it was appropriate. How they said it, not they weren't empathetic. They didn't do the ethical thing of still assessing him because they were trying to follow their quote unquote policy.
Mhm.
And also, aside from just like what they were saying, like, oh, I have vacation, oh, I have so many cases, like they were putting stuff on the client that's not the client's problem. So aside from just the other things, they were putting things on him to make him try to feel bad and like make him like think he's the problem in that sense by putting all that stuff on him. So I think that whole conversation was like completely unprofessional from the beginning of it, actually.
Absolutely. And the bad part about that is typically how fathers are received when it comes to them asking questions, especially fathers that want to know why you're not doing your job in so many words, right? They're questioning you like, well, what about this? And why you haven't been contacting me and I've contacted you. And when you are in a hierarchy of power, sometimes that is how you may respond. Like, I don't have to. You know, I have other cases. The mother's the only one that I have to speak to. I don't have to assess you. I don't have to give you resources. I don't even have to be entering you right now. And it's sad because then that's how the continuum of disdainful, taste or experiences that a lot of fathers have when it comes to just trying to receive information so that they can move forward when it comes to their children. Go ahead.
And I think it just highlights the bigger issue in Georgia in regards to child care and
Mhm.
child safety. Um, we all know that kinship placement is the best placement if the biological parent is not available, and I just
Yep.
don't think that is prioritized in this state. And then it trickles down to those one-on-one interactions with individuals that are directly impacted by it. I'm not saying Ohio is the best at this at all, but many moons ago when I lived in Ohio, I worked in therapeutic foster care,
Mhm.
and I'll just specifically speak on an agency, and the team I had is that we actively sought kinship placement. It's like we did not want to put that baby in foster care because once they get into the system, it's hard
Mhm.
to get them out. And sometimes I feel like that is just not, it's just not a priority. Like, um, and I think that is a system-wide issue, and hence why you're doing this presentation, probably because leadership has to set the tone,
Right.
and make it very clear that we want to make sure we exhaust all options before we put this baby in foster care. So thank you.
And that is why it is so important, regardless of what position you are in, regardless of your title, every one of us in here, we are a leader. The case manager could have been a leader and apologizing to the dad and saying, you know what, I'm sorry, you have been trying to contact me. Is there a date and time that we could schedule for in the future to be assessed? The supervisor, when she said, oh, I have a foster care case manager get in contact with you, she could have taken the time and given the dad the information for the foster care case manager for follow-up for himself. Even when it came to, the placement, again, just apologizing and also telling the father about the process, what's the next steps, so the dad can be aware of what he needs to do moving forward in the process. There's so many different things that we can do to kind of help these families through the process, but we have to lead with integrity. We have to be accountable for our actions. We have to behave ethically so that these families will get good experiences and so that they can move forward and progress in whatever ways we're asking them to. And to me, that's so important because being honest with you all, a lot of these families would be more compliant or would be more receptive to the services, to the referrals, to the help, if we give them a sense of humanity when we're dealing with them. That's why it is important all the way from the, person answering the phone all the way up to the county director or the program manager, is that we all treat the families, the youth and the children that we serve with respect, that we treat them with integrity. And we have a few more minutes. I do want to ask a few quick questions right quick, and there is a prize involved. Do you all remember the 3 statistics that I named at the beginning concerning what's going on in Georgia? Do you all remember?
So I do remember the victimization for African American children was nearly double that
Uh-huh.
of Caucasian children. It was like 58 to 32.
Uh-huh.
Georgia is at 46% for non-relative placement
Mm-hmm.
versus nationwide it's only 6%.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, I missed one.
They telling you.
I can't.
Uh-huh.
37. Yeah, we were ranked 37.
Yep.
And it's so crazy to me, y'all. Not that it's related. Georgia, we at bottom of the barrel every time. It don't matter what it is. If it's mental health, if it's physical health, if it's services.
You gonna give it? You can take it to her. Absolutely. Okay. All right. What are the 3 foundational things that we talked about today regarding leadership? Is it up there? No, it's not up there. It was in the title of the presentation. Uh-huh. It's 3. Everybody can't say it. One person want to say it? Go ahead.
Integrity, ethics, accountability.
Yep, absolutely. All right. And the last one is, does anyone remember the services that our agency offers? There's 3. Does anyone remember the services that our agency offers? Go ahead.
Family advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
the assistance in legitimization,
Uh-huh.
and oh yeah, case management.
Yep. Yep.
So I had to say it. Oh, that's my lucky girl. She
Thank you. Thank you, you all. Have a great day.